Welcome back to the channel, and if you're new here, you're about to witness a story that'll change how you think about love, power, and redemption. Before we dive in, do me a quick favor. Smash that like button, drop a comment with your thoughts, and most importantly, hit subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. Trust me, you'll want to stick around for what happens next. Now let's get into it. Yi Min Park walked past 50 of the world's most beautiful women without blinking. Not one glance, not a flicker of interest, nothing. These weren't just attractive people at some random party. We're talking supermodels whose faces sell luxury cars and diamond watches. Women who have graced magazine covers in Paris, Milan, Tokyo, each one positioned perfectly in that ballroom, wearing gowns that cost more than most people make in a year. He saw every single one of them. His eyes registered their presence the way you'd notice furniture in a hotel lobby. There, acknowledged, irrelevant. But then Alina Brooks smiled while carrying a tray of champagne glasses, and the most dangerous man in Seoul forgot how to breathe. Now I know what you're thinking. Another rich guy falls for the help, right? Seen it before, except you haven't seen this. Because what happened next didn't just change two lives, it dismantled an empire built on blood and fear over 3 generations. This is about what happens when someone who's learned to feel nothing suddenly feels everything. The Lotus Garden Charity Gala wasn't actually about charity. Everyone in that ballroom knew it. Yi Min certainly knew it. These events existed so Seoul's elite could parade their wealth, make connections that would later become profitable, and pretend they cared about orphans or cancer research or whatever cause was fashionable that season. Yi Min attended because his father demanded it. Chairman Park didn't ask. He commanded and you obeyed, or you discovered exactly why the Park family controlled half the underground economy in South Korea. At 29, Yi Min had already been groomed for 15 years to take over operations. His education hadn't come from universities, though he had degrees from both Oxford and Harvard, window dressing for legitimacy. Real learning happened in back rooms where men negotiated territory with guns on the table, where debts got collected in ways that never made the news. He'd watched his father break a man's hand with a crystal paperweight over a 2% discrepancy in protection payments. Yi Min had been 12. By 16, he was sitting in on strategy sessions. By 21, he was running enforcement in Gangnam. Now he essentially operated as his father's second-in-command, the heir apparent everyone feared would be worse than Chairman Park because Yi Min was smarter, colder, more efficient. They were wrong about the worst part, but they didn't know that yet. Neither did Yi Min really. The ballroom sparkled with crystal chandeliers that cost more than a house. Everything gleamed, the marble floors, the gold accents, the jewelry dripping from wrists and necks. Servers moved through the crowd like ghosts, practiced at being invisible while the important people talked about important things. Yi Min stood near the bar, champagne in hand he wouldn't drink. Alcohol meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant death in his world. Women approached him all night, they always did. Song Jae-woo, an actress whose face dominated billboard advertisements across Asia, touched his arm and laughed at something he hadn't said. Her perfume probably cost $500 an ounce. She smiled with perfect teeth that had definitely been enhanced, though skillfully. "You look bored, Yi Min SSI," she purred in Korean, then switched to English because she knew he preferred it at these events. "We could find somewhere more private." Direct, he almost appreciated that. "I'm exactly where I need to be," he replied, his tone not quite cold enough to be an insult but nowhere near warm enough to encourage her. She pouted prettily and drifted away. Another would replace her within minutes, they always did. 3 more women tried their luck in the next 20 minutes. A fashion designer from France, a tech CEO's daughter from Singapore, a professional golfer whose name he forgot the moment she said it, each one beautiful by any objective standard. Each one boring him to the point where he considered leaving early despite his father's instructions to maintain appearances. That was Yi Min's existence: maintain appearances, smile when required, project power, show no weakness, feel nothing. The feeling nothing part had become easier over the years. When you watch your father orchestrate violence as casually as other men play golf, something inside you learns to shut down. Self-preservation, his therapist would have called it if Yi Min were the type to see therapists. which he absolutely wasn't because therapy meant confession and confession meant vulnerability, and we've already established what vulnerability meant. So he performed, showed up to galas, wore the right suits. This one was Tom Ford charcoal gray, tailored so precisely it might as well have been painted on, shook the right hands, made the right connections, laughed at the right jokes. Inside, nothing. A void where emotions should have lived. His phone buzzed, a message from Min Jun, his head of security. Situation in Itaewon needs your attention. Code for someone hadn't paid what they owed, and things were escalating. Yi Min typed back, "Handle it, I'm stuck here another hour." Min Jun would know what handle it meant, probably a visit from the collection team, maybe some property damage, nothing too dramatic. You didn't kill over small debts, bad for business. Fear worked better when applied precisely, like a scalpel instead of a hammer. This was his life, luxury and violence in equal measure, separated by the thinnest of margins. He scanned the room again, calculating exit routes out of habit. 3 doors, 2 of them monitored by his own people. Windows too high to be practical, security positions memorized, always aware, always ready, never relaxed. Across the ballroom, Chairman Park held court with a cluster of politicians and business leaders. His father looked distinguished in his tuxedo, silver hair perfectly styled, every inch the respectable businessman. No one watching would guess he'd ordered 3 executions that month alone. Yi Min had signed off on 2 of them. That's when he decided to do one more circuit of the room before finding an excuse to leave. Headache, urgent business matter, any convenient lie. His father would be angry, but Yi Min would handle that later. He moved through the crowd, acknowledging greetings with minimal nods, deflecting attempts at conversation. Past the auction tables displaying luxury goods for charity bids. Past the string quartet playing something classical and forgettable. Past the clusters of souls finest pretending they weren't all complicit in systems of exploitation and corruption. Past model after model after model. Seriously, someone had definitely hired them for atmosphere. They stood positioned throughout the venue like living decorations, each one stunning, each one looking at him with varying degrees of interest. He registered them the way you'd notice expensive wallpaper, pretty, professionally done, utterly meaningless. Then Alina Brooks turned around with a tray of champagne, caught his eye by accident and smiled. Not at him specifically, she was just smiling at nothing, at everything, at some private joke the universe had told her, a genuine expression of contentment that had nothing to do with ambition or seduction or strategy. Just a woman wearing a server's uniform, happy for no reason Yi Min could identify. And he stopped walking. Literally stopped mid-step, 1 foot in the air like someone had paused him. What the hell was that? His chest felt strange, tight, like he'd forgotten how to process oxygen correctly. His heart, which normally maintained a steady 60 beats per minute whether he was in a business meeting or watching someone get beaten unconscious, suddenly decided to throw a party. Alina hadn't noticed him yet. She was offering champagne to a group of guests, that smile never wavering, saying something polite in Korean that he couldn't hear from this distance. Her accent suggested she'd learned the language well but wasn't a native speaker. She was beautiful, but not in the way the models were beautiful. They were beautiful the way art in museums is beautiful, perfect, untouchable, designed to be admired from a distance. Alina was beautiful the way a genuine laugh is beautiful, or the way morning light through windows is beautiful. Real, alive. Present in her own skin in a way that suggested she'd never once tried to be anything other than exactly who she was. Her hair was pulled back practically, her uniform was standard issue, nothing special. She wore minimal makeup, no jewelry except small earrings he could barely see. In that smile, God, that smile. It reached her eyes, created little crinkles at the corners that spoke of frequent use. This wasn't a smile she'd practiced in a mirror or deployed strategically. This was just her face when she was content. Yi Min had forgotten faces could do that. Someone bumped into him from behind, a server carrying an empty tray, apologizing profusely in Korean. Yi Min barely heard them. He was still staring at Alina, trying to understand why his entire nervous system had apparently decided to malfunction. She moved to the next cluster of guests. Her movements were efficient but not rushed, confident but not arrogant. she knew exactly what she was doing and did it well without making a performance of it. Professional, grounded, real. 3 words Yi Min would have said described exactly 0 people at this event, himself included. He started walking toward her without consciously deciding to do it. This was insane. He didn't approach servers at galas, he barely noticed they existed. They were furniture, background elements functionally invisible. That sounded terrible, but it was honest. In his world, you learn to categorize people quickly: threats, assets, or irrelevant. Alina should have been irrelevant. Instead, she was the only person in this entire ballroom who felt like she mattered. Yi Min had negotiated with Yakuza lieutenants who'd kill him if they sensed weakness. He'd stared down corrupt prosecutors while wearing a wire. He'd walked into rooms where everyone was armed and he wasn't, then walked out having gotten exactly what he wanted. But approaching one waitress to ask for champagne he didn't want suddenly felt like the most dangerous thing he'd ever done. What was wrong with him? She was finishing with another group, laughing at something one of the guests said. The laugh sounded genuine too. How did someone maintain that kind of authenticity while working an event like this? Everyone here was performing, playing roles, wearing masks. Except her, apparently. Yi Min intercepted her path as she turned. "Excuse me." Alina looked up, and the full force of those eyes hit him directly. Brown, warm, intelligent. A little tired around the edges, she'd probably been on her feet for hours, but still bright with that inexplicable contentment he'd seen from across the room. "Yes, sir, would you like champagne?" Her English was American, no discernible regional accent that he could identify immediately. "Please." He took a glass he absolutely wouldn't drink, just to keep her there another moment. Up close he could see the small details. A tiny scar near her left eyebrow, the way her name tag read Alina with no last name, the slight calluses on her fingers that suggested she did work beyond serving at events. "Are you enjoying the gala?" she asked, the question reflexive, part of her professional script. But something in her eyes suggested she was actually curious about the answer. Nobody ever actually wanted to know if Yi Min was enjoying anything. They assumed he was, or they didn't care, or they were too busy managing their own agendas to consider his experience. Not particularly, he heard himself say, honest in a way he never was at these things. Her smile shifted, became more specific. "Yeah, I get that. These events are kind of exhausting, aren't they? All this." She gestured vaguely at the opulence surrounding them. "Performance." Yi Min blinked. She just articulated in one sentence what he'd been thinking all night. Performance, that's exactly what this was. "You don't enjoy them either?" he asked, genuinely curious now. "I mean, the paycheck's good," Alina said with a slight shrug, that smile going a bit rueful. "And I've seen worse gigs, but yeah, there's something kind of hollow about it all, you know? Everyone's so concerned with being seen, nobody's actually present." Present. When was the last time Yi Min had been present anywhere? Actually present, not just physically occupying space while his mind ran threat assessments and strategic calculations. He couldn't remember. "I'm Yi Min," he said, extending his hand. Professional servers probably weren't supposed to shake hands with guests, but Alina did it anyway without hesitation. Her grip was firm, confident. "Alina, nice to meet you." She didn't recognize his name, had no idea who he was, what he represented, what he could do with a single phone call. To her, he was just another wealthy guest at another high society event. The relief that flooded through him at that realization was almost physical. "Are you from Seoul?" he asked, not wanting her to leave, not ready to return to the performance he'd been giving all night. "No, I moved here about 8 months ago from the States. I'm an actress, well, trying to be. The server thing pays the bills while I audition." She said it without embarrassment, just stating facts. "What about you? What do you do?" What did he do? Run a criminal empire, oversee illegal operations across 3 countries, facilitate corruption, destroy lives when necessary. "Business," he said vaguely, "import-export mostly." It wasn't technically a lie, they did import and export things. The things just happened to be illegal and the business practices would get you decades in prison. "Sounds fascinating," Alina said, and he couldn't tell if she was being polite or sarcastic. Her smile suggested maybe both. Someone was calling for champagne across the ballroom. Alina glanced that direction, then back at Yimin. I should probably. Of course, he stepped back, releasing her from the conversation. But she hesitated, just for a second, but he caught it. Maybe I'll see you around, she said, and it sounded like a genuine hope rather than a polite nothing. Maybe, Yimin agreed, watching her move back into the crowd. His phone buzzed again. Minjun, situation resolved, minor property damage, message received. Yimin pocketed the phone without responding. He stood there in the middle of the gala, champagne glass in hand, and felt something he couldn't name. It wasn't attraction exactly, though Alina was definitely attractive. It wasn't intrigue, though he was definitely intrigued. It was more like recognition. Like some part of him that had been dormant for years had suddenly woken up and said, "Oh, there you are," to some part of her. Which was completely insane and absolutely not something he should be feeling about a waitress he'd spoken to for maybe 90 seconds. Yimin set the champagne glass on a nearby table and went looking for his father. Chairman Park was still networking, discussing something with a real estate developer whose projects the Park family had financed through carefully laundered money. He saw Yimin approach and excused himself smoothly. Leaving early? His father asked in Korean, his tone making it clear this wasn't actually a question. Headache? Yimin lied in the same language. Minjun handled the Itaewon situation. I should review the outcome. Chairman Park studied him with eyes that missed nothing. His father had built an empire by reading people, by seeing through deceptions, by knowing when someone was hiding something. Yimin kept his expression neutral, bored even. After a moment his father nodded. Don't stay away too long, the Nakamura delegation arrives next week, I need you sharp. I'll be ready. The Nakamura delegation? Right. Japanese Yakuza representatives coming to renegotiate territorial agreements in Busan, high stakes, potentially violent if handled incorrectly. Yimin should have been thinking about that, preparing for it, running scenarios. Instead, as he walked toward the exit, he found himself scanning the room for Alina. He spotted her near the kitchen entrance, laughing with another server while they restocked their trays. She looked completely at ease, comfortable in her own skin in a way he'd never managed to be. Their eyes met across the ballroom for just a moment. She smiled, not the professional server smile, something warmer, more personal, like they shared a secret. Yimin felt that strange tightness in his chest again and forced himself to look away. This was stupid, dangerous even. He didn't have room in his life for distractions, especially not the kind that came wrapped in genuine smiles and unexpected authenticity. He left the gala, climbed into the back of his armored Mercedes, and told his driver to take him home. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Yimin told himself he'd forget about Alina. He had actual problems to deal with. The Nakamura negotiations required intense preparation, learning every detail about their operation, identifying leverage points, understanding what they wanted versus what they'd settle for. One miscalculation could start a war that would cost lives and money. Then there was the Busan port situation. Their main shipping contact had been arrested and they needed to establish new channels before the next shipment arrived. Delays meant missed payments, which meant unhappy partners, which meant potential violence. Plus the usual daily operations, debt collection, territory management, payoffs to police and politicians, laundering revenue through legitimate businesses. The empire didn't run itself. Plenty to occupy his mind. Except every time he had a spare moment, he thought about that smile. It was infuriating. Yimin didn't get distracted. He compartmentalized perfectly, focusing completely on whatever task required attention, then moving to the next without residual thoughts cluttering his mental space. But Alina had somehow bypassed all his usual defenses. He'd be in a meeting discussing shipping routes and suddenly remember the way she'd called the gala a performance. He'd be reviewing financial statements and think about how her handshake had been firm and confident. He'd be trying to sleep and wonder what she was doing right now if she thought about their brief conversation at all. After a week, he did something he'd never done before. He tried to find her. Not personally, that would be ridiculous, but he had people for this sort of thing. He made a call to his information specialist, a woman named Sun Hai who could find out anything about anyone given enough time and motivation. "I need information on someone," he said, hatting himself even as the words left his mouth. "Elena Brooks, American, moved to Seoul about 8 months ago, works as an event server trying to break into acting." Sun Hai didn't ask why he wanted this information. She never asked why. That's what made her valuable. 2 hours later, she sent him a file. Elena Marie Brooks, 26 years old, originally from Atlanta, Georgia, bachelor's degree in theater from NYU, moved to Seoul in March after a bad breakup. The ex-boyfriend had been controlling, possibly abusive, details unclear, working for premium event staffing agency while auditioning for roles. Living in a tiny apartment in Hongdae, no criminal record, not even a parking ticket, clean social media presence, mostly friends and family back in the States, a few headshots on professional websites. One interesting detail: her younger brother had been killed in gang violence 5 years ago in Atlanta, caught in crossfire during a territory dispute. Senseless, random, tragic. Yi-min stared at that detail for a long time. She'd lost someone to the exact kind of violence he helped perpetuate. Different country, different gangs, but the mechanisms were identical. Territory, money, power, someone gets killed. He should delete the file and forget about her. He didn't delete the file. Instead, against every instinct screaming that this was a terrible idea, he did more research, found out which agency she worked for, learned their schedule, discovered they staffed most major events in Seoul. Then he waited. The opportunity came 2 weeks after the gala. Another charity event, this one for children's education. Yi-min normally would have sent a proxy, but he volunteered to attend personally. His father seemed pleased by the initiative, assuming Yi-min was taking more interest in the legitimate social obligations that came with their position. Chairman Park had no idea his son was there to see if a specific waitress might be working. The event was smaller than the gala, held at an art gallery in Gangnam. About 200 guests, mostly corporate executives and their spouses, boring speeches about literacy rates and funding. Yi-min barely registered any of it. He was scanning the servers. For the first hour, no sign of her. He started thinking this whole thing had been stupid, that he'd attended this tedious event for nothing, that he should just leave and... Then Elena walked out of the back room carrying a tray of hors d'oeuvres. She wore the same type of uniform, black and white and professional. Her hair was different tonight, down instead of pulled back, and she'd worn slightly more makeup. But that smile when she offered canapés to guests near the entrance was exactly the same. Genuine warmth, real. Yi-min's heart did that stupid racing thing again. He waited, watched her work the room. She was good at this, engaging with guests just enough to be personable without being intrusive, reading social cues perfectly, making people feel attended to without feeling served. She hadn't seen him yet. He was standing near a sculpture that probably cost more than most cars, nursing a glass of whiskey he'd accepted purely as a prop. When she finally turned his direction, their eyes met and something in her face shifted. Recognition, then surprise, then that smile, the real one, just for him. She made her way over, navigating through clusters of guests. "Well," Elena said when she reached him, "this is unexpected." "Is it?" Yi-min asked. "Don't you work most of these events?" "Yeah, but you don't strike me as the type who attends every charity function in Seoul." She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Children's education fundraiser seems a little tame for someone in import-export." Was she teasing him? She was definitely teasing him. When was the last time someone had teased Yi-min? "Maybe I'm passionate about literacy," he said deadpan. Elena laughed, a genuine sound that made several people glance their direction. "Sure, you just seem like the type to read philosophy in your spare time." "Poetry, actually." It slipped out before he could stop it. He didn't tell people that. It felt too vulnerable, too revealing, but something about Elena made him want to be honest. Her expression softened. "Really? Yeats, Neruda, Rumi, sometimes Basho if I'm feeling contemplative." "Huh," she seemed genuinely surprised, pleased even. "I wouldn't have guessed that." "What would you have guessed?" He was curious now, wanting to know how she saw him. Elena considered for a moment. Honestly, I figured you for business journals and maybe some Machiavelli. The poetry thing is nice, unexpected but nice. She had no idea how close to accurate the Machiavelli guess was. Someone across the room was gesturing for champagne. Alina noticed but didn't immediately rush off. I should probably work, she said, but she didn't move. Probably, Yimin agreed. They stood there anyway, caught in some kind of suspended moment. Would you want to get coffee sometime? The question came out of his mouth before his brain could approve it. What was he doing? Alina's eyebrows raised. Are you asking me out? I'm asking if you'd like to have coffee, as humans sometimes do. That smile again, the one that made his chest feel strange, smooth. Is that a yes? She studied him for a long moment, and Yi Min had the unsettling sense that she was seeing more than he wanted her to see, reading something in him that he usually kept carefully hidden. Okay, she finally said, coffee, but somewhere not fancy. Okay, I get enough of fancy at these things. Deal. They exchanged numbers. Alina saved his contact with just Yi Min and no last name, no idea she was texting with someone whose family controlled a significant portion of Seoul's underworld. Better that way, he thought. Much better that way. They met at a small cafe in Hongdae 3 days later. Yi Min arrived early, which he never did, and found himself actually nervous, which he definitely never was. He'd worn jeans and a simple black sweater, trying to look casual, normal, like someone who didn't order violence before breakfast. Alina showed up exactly on time, wearing ripped jeans and a vintage band t-shirt, her hair in a messy bun, no makeup except maybe some lip gloss. She looked completely different from the polished server at the events, somehow even more beautiful in her casualness. Hey, she said, sliding into the seat across from him, no suit today. Seemed excessive for coffee. Good call, you look more human this way. More human, if only she knew how far from human he sometimes felt. They ordered an Americano for him, some complicated caramel latte thing for her, and fell into conversation that felt startlingly easy. Alina told him about the auditions she'd been going to. Mostly small roles in commercials and web dramas, nothing major yet, but she was persistent. She talked about how different the Korean entertainment industry was from what she'd expected, the language barriers she still navigated, the cultural adjustments. Why Seoul? Yi Min asked. Why not stay in the States or try somewhere else? Her expression clouded slightly. I needed a fresh start, complete change of scenery. Seoul was about as different from Atlanta as I could get. He remembered the file, the bad breakup, the controlling ex-boyfriend, didn't mention that he knew. Do you miss home? He asked instead. Sometimes I miss my family, my mom especially, but, she stirred her latte absently, I was becoming someone I didn't like back there, getting small. Seoul forced me to be bigger, braver. Does that make sense? It made perfect sense. Yi Min had spent his entire life being forced into a shape that wasn't natural to him, becoming smaller and harder and colder to survive in his father's world. But he couldn't say that, so he just nodded. What about you? Alina asked. The import-export thing, do you enjoy it? No. The honesty surprised them both. Oh, she said, clearly not expecting that. Then why do it? Family business, not really a choice. Alina tilted her head, considering. There's always a choice, might be a hard one, might come with consequences, but there's always a choice. Such simple wisdom, such profound naivety. In her world, maybe there were always choices. In his, choices got people killed, including the person making them. It's complicated, he said. Most things are. She took a sip of her drink, left a small foam mustache that she wiped away unself-consciously. But complicated doesn't mean impossible, just means you have to really want it. Did he want something different? Want out of the empire, out of the violence, out of the performance he'd been giving his entire life? He'd never let himself actually consider that question seriously. Until now, sitting across from a woman who'd moved halfway across the world to become bigger and braver, who smiled like she meant it and spoke like honesty was just her default setting. Tell me more about the poetry, Alina said, changing the subject, maybe sensing she'd pushed too hard. What's your favorite? They spent the next 2 hours talking. About books and movies and music. About what it felt like to be far from home versus feeling at home somewhere far, about ambition and fear and the ways people protect themselves from pain. Yimin found himself saying things he'd never said to anyone. About how empty the luxury felt sometimes, how performance became so habitual you forgot there was supposed to be something real underneath, how he'd learned to shut down emotions so effectively he sometimes wondered if he'd ever be able to turn them back on. Alina listened without judgment, without offering useless advice, just present and attentive in that way she had. When she talked about her brother, she brought it up. He didn't ask, tears filled her eyes but didn't fall. Marcus was 17, she said quietly. Wrong place, wrong time, just gone, and the guys who did it, they probably don't even remember. Just another day, another victim, another senseless tragedy in a war over nothing that actually matters. Yimin's throat felt tight. He wanted to tell her he understood, that he'd seen that same senseless violence from the other side, that he was complicit in systems that created those tragedies, that if she knew what he really was, she'd probably walk away and never look back. Instead he said, "I'm sorry." Yeah, she wiped her eyes, took a breath. Me too, but it's why I try to stay genuine, you know, life's too short for fake smiles and performances. Marcus deserved better than a meaningless death. I figure I owe it to him to live a meaningful life. A meaningful life. What would that even look like for Yimin? When the cafe started closing, they realized they'd been talking for nearly 4 hours. It felt like 20 minutes. I should go, Alina said, but she didn't move. You should, Yimin agreed, not moving either. They walked out together. The street was busy with Friday night crowds, young people headed to bars and clubs, the energy of Hongdae in full swing. Can I see you again? Yimin asked. Alina looked up at him, and in the neon light from surrounding shops, her eyes seemed to see straight through every defense he'd ever built. Yes, she said simply, I'd like that. They stood there awkwardly for a moment, and then Alina laughed, broke the tension, gave him a quick hug that shouldn't have felt as significant as it did. Text me, she said, stepping back. And Yimin, thanks for being real tonight, I needed that. She disappeared into the crowd before he could respond. Yimin stood on the sidewalk watching her go and felt something shift in his chest, something fundamental, like a wall he'd built years ago had developed a crack. His phone buzzed, his father, family dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m., don't be late. Back to reality, back to the performance, back to being the heir to an empire built on everything Alina's brother had died from. But for 4 hours he'd been something else. Someone else. Someone who maybe, possibly, could imagine a different kind of life. Over the next month, Yimin lived 2 completely separate existences. By day and by night when required, he was exactly who he'd always been, the Park family heir, cold, efficient, ruthless when necessary. He attended meetings with the Nakamura delegation and negotiated terms that avoided conflict while protecting their interests, oversaw a hostile takeover of a rival organization's territory in Busan, signed off on collection actions that resulted in broken bones and burned businesses. He did these things without hesitation, without remorse, because hesitation got you killed and remorse was a luxury he couldn't afford. But whenever he had spare time, hours carved out of his schedule through careful manipulation, he became someone different. Someone who met Alina for coffee, for walks along the Han River, for cheap meals at Pajangmacha food stalls she insisted were better than fancy restaurants, for late-night conversations where they sat on her apartment building's roof and talked about everything except what he actually did for a living. She told him about auditions, about the roles she was landing, small parts, background work, but progress nonetheless. About her family back in Georgia, her mom's worry about her being so far away, her friends who thought moving to Korea was crazy. He told her edited versions of truth. About the pressure of family expectations, the weight of inherited obligations, the feeling of being trapped in a life someone else designed for you, all true just with key details carefully omitted. Like the fact that family business meant criminal empire. That pressure meant his father threatening to disown or possibly kill him if he refused his role. That obligations included things that would horrify her if she knew. Yimin knew this couldn't last. Eventually, she'd find out who he really was, what he really did, and she'd leave. Or eventually, his father would find out about her, see her as a weakness, and eliminate the distraction. But in those stolen hours he let himself pretend. Pretend he was just Yi-min, not the park heir. Pretend he was someone who could have a normal relationship with a woman who smiled like she meant it. Pretend that maybe, somehow, there could be a different ending to this story. The delusion was dangerous. The delusion was also the only thing that made him feel alive. If you're hooked by this story, hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will change everything you think you know about love and redemption. 6 weeks into whatever they were doing, Alina asked the question Yi-min had been dreading. They were at her apartment, a tiny studio in Hongdae that cost probably a tenth of what he spent monthly on car maintenance. She'd cooked dinner, or attempted to, kimchi jjigae that was slightly too salty but tasted better than anything he'd eaten at Michelin-starred restaurants because she'd made it. "So," she said, setting down her chopsticks, "are you going to tell me what you actually do?" Yi-min's stomach dropped. "I told you, import-export." "Right, import-export." Alina's voice was gentle but firm. "Yi-min, I'm not stupid. You have security following you everywhere. Don't think I haven't noticed. You get phone calls at weird hours and disappear for days. You never talk about actual work details. And last week I saw your car. That's not import-export money. That's something else entirely." She wasn't angry, just waiting, giving him space to be honest. He could lie, make up something plausible, she might even believe it. But sitting there in her tiny apartment with its second-hand furniture and string lights, eating soup she'd made for him, Yi-min realized he was exhausted from lying. "If I tell you the truth," he said slowly, "you'll leave. Maybe, maybe not, but I deserve to know who I'm spending time with." Fair, completely fair. Yi-min set down his own chopsticks, took a breath, and made a decision that would change both their lives. "My family runs a criminal organization," he said. "We control territory, manage illegal operations, facilitate corruption. My father is Chairman Park. If you follow Korean news, you might recognize the name from various scandals we've successfully distanced ourselves from. I'm his heir, his successor, the person who will eventually take over an empire built on violence, extortion, and blood." The words hung in the air between them. Alina's face went through several expressions: shock, disbelief, realization, then something he couldn't quite read. You're Korean Mafia," she finally said. "We don't use that term, but essentially, yes." "How much of what you've told me is true?" "Most of it, the family pressure, the feeling trapped, the empty luxury, all true. I just omitted the criminal part." Alina stood up, walked to her window, stared out at the Hongdae streets below. Yi-min waited, his heart pounding in a way it never did during actual dangerous situations. Minutes passed, maybe 5, maybe 10, he lost track. "My brother died because of gang violence," she finally said, not turning around. "I know, I'm sorry." She did turn then, eyes sharp. "You knew, how did you?" Realization dawned. "You investigated me." "Yes." "Before or after we started seeing each other?" "After the gala, before the coffee." Alina crossed her arms, processing. "Anything else I should know? Secret wife, kids, multiple murders." "No wife, no kids, the murders." He paused. "I haven't personally killed anyone if that's what you're asking, but I've ordered actions that resulted in deaths. Not many, but enough." He expected her to throw him out, scream, cry, something. Instead, she sat back down, looked at him with those eyes that seemed to see everything, and asked, "Do you want to be doing this?" What? Yi-min hadn't expected that question. "Do you want to be running a criminal empire? Is this the life you'd choose if you actually had a choice?" Nobody had ever asked him that, not directly, not genuinely. "No," he admitted, "God no, but it's not that simple." "It never is." Alina's voice was softer now. "Tell me what would happen if you tried to leave." So he did. Explained how his father had groomed him since childhood. How refusal meant not just disownment but genuine danger. His father had eliminated family members before for disloyalty. How the organization couldn't just lose its heir without consequences. How knowledge of their operations made him a permanent liability. "I'm trapped," he finished. "Have been my entire life. The only options are succeed my father or die trying to escape." Alina was quiet for a long moment. Then, what if there was a third option? "There isn't." "What if you transformed it from the inside?" She leaned forward, engaged now despite the horror of what he'd told her. Not leave, not run, change it. Use your position to gradually shift operations toward legitimate business. Dismantle the harmful parts piece by piece. It would take years probably and be incredibly dangerous, but my father would never allow it. Your father's not immortal, you said you're the heir. Eventually you'll have control. What if you started laying groundwork now? Small changes, subtle shifts, building legitimate revenue streams that could eventually replace the illegal ones. Yi Min stared at her. You're suggesting reform the organization. I'm suggesting you become the person you want to be instead of the person you've been told to be. You said life's about choices, so make one. It was insane, impossible, would take decades and might get him killed before he accomplished anything significant. It was also the first real hope he'd felt in years. Why, he asked, why would you even suggest this instead of just walking away? Alina's expression softened. Because in 6 weeks I've seen who you actually are under all that armor, someone who reads poetry, who listens when people talk, who hates the violence he's part of. That person deserves a chance to exist fully, not just in stolen hours at coffee shops. She reached across the table, took his hand. I won't lie, this scares me, everything about this terrifies me. You represent the exact thing that destroyed my family, but I also see someone trying to be better, trying to find a way out, and I think I want to help you find that way. Yi Min felt something crack open in his chest. Alina. I'm not saying I'm okay with what you do, I'm saying I see potential for what you could become. There's a difference. He turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. This will be dangerous for both of us. I know. My father will see you as a weakness, a distraction. Then we'll be careful. I can't guarantee. Yi Min, she squeezed his hand. I'm not asking for guarantees, I'm asking if you're willing to try, to actually fight for a different life instead of just accepting the one you were given. Was he willing? Everything in him said this was suicide, said he should walk away from Alina right now, protect her from what knowing him would bring, said transformation was impossible, that his father would crush any attempt at reform, that he was delusional to even consider it. But looking at Alina, at this woman who'd somehow seen past every defense he'd built and decided he was worth believing in anyway, Yi Min felt something he'd never felt before. Possibility. Yes, he heard himself say, I'm willing to try. Her smile could have lit the entire city. Okay then, let's figure this out. They talked until dawn. Transformation of a criminal empire wasn't something you did quickly or obviously. Over the next several weeks, while maintaining his normal duties, Yi Min started making subtle changes. Small investments in legitimate businesses, gradual reduction of the most violent operations, shifting focus toward financial crime and corruption, still illegal but less bloody. Alina became his sounding board, his conscience, his reality check. She'd ask questions that forced him to examine his rationalizations, challenge him when he made compromises that went too far, celebrate small victories when he successfully diverted resources away from harm. They were careful, met secretly, varied locations, no public displays that would attract attention. As far as anyone in his organization knew, Yi Min was just going through a phase of increased discretion. His father noticed the changes in him though. You seem distracted lately, Chairman Park said during one of their weekly strategy meetings. Anything I should know about? No, sir, just thinking about long-term sustainability. Some of our operations are drawing too much police attention. We should consider diversifying. A partial truth, the best lies always were. His father studied him with those calculating eyes. Diversifying into what? Real estate, technology investments, cryptocurrency, markets where we can launder more efficiently while building actually profitable legitimate fronts. This was strategic. Yi Min knew his father cared about profit and sustainability above all else. If he could frame transformation as good business rather than moral reformation, he had a chance. Chairman Park nodded slowly. Interesting, develop a proposal, we'll discuss it with the advisory board. A small victory, not permission but not rejection either. That night Yi Min told Alina about the conversation. They were at a hotel in Incheon, 40 minutes from Seoul, far enough to be safe from casual observation. That's progress, she said, lying next to him in bed. he's listening at least. He's listening to business logic. If he suspected the actual motivation, I'd be dead. Alina turned to face him, traced a finger along his jaw. You're braver than you think. I'm terrified constantly. That's what makes it brave. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing the right thing despite being afraid. How did she do that? Make him feel like maybe he could actually pull this off. They'd been together 3 months now, 3 months of the most intense relationship Yi Min had ever experienced. Not just because of the physical connection, though that was extraordinary, being with someone who saw the real him, darkness and all, and chose to stay anyway. But emotionally, intellectually, spiritually, however you wanted to define it, Alina had become essential to his existence in a way that was both beautiful and terrifying. Because essential meant vulnerable, vulnerable meant his father would eventually notice, and when his father noticed. What are you thinking? Alina asked. That I love you, and that loving you might be the most dangerous thing I've ever done. He hadn't planned to say it. The words just came out, 3 months of feeling condensed into one admission. Alina's eyes went bright with tears. I love you too, even though I probably shouldn't, even though this is insane and complicated and potentially deadly, I love you anyway. They made love slowly, carefully, like they could protect each other through tenderness alone. Afterward, lying in the dark with Alina asleep against his chest, Yi Min made a silent promise. He would find a way out, transform the organization or destroy it trying, build a life where Alina was safe, where they could be together without constant fear. He had no idea how he'd accomplish it. But for her, he'd figure it out. The problem with double lives is they eventually collide. For Yi Min and Alina, the collision came 5 months after their first meeting, during what should have been a routine business dinner. Yi Min was meeting with potential partners, legitimate partners, actually venture capitalists interested in a tech startup his organization was funding as part of the diversification strategy. Clean money, clean business, exactly the kind of thing he was trying to build. The dinner was at an upscale Korean fusion restaurant in Gangnam. Yi Min arrived with Min Jun and another bodyguard, standard protocol for any business meeting. Alina was working there that night. He saw her the moment he walked in, standing near the bar talking to another server. She was laughing at something, hadn't noticed him yet, and for one frozen moment Yi Min debated turning around and leaving. Too late, she looked up, their eyes met, and he watched her expression shift from surprise to concern. They'd agreed to keep their relationship completely separate from his professional life. She'd never met anyone from his organization. As far as his people knew, he was single, focused, unattached. Seeing her here in this context was dangerous in ways he couldn't immediately quantify. Min Jun noticed his hesitation. Everything okay, boss? Fine, let's sit. Throughout the dinner, Yi Min was hyper-aware of Alina's presence. She didn't come to their table, another server handled them, but he felt her there, could track her movement through the restaurant peripherally. The meeting went well. The venture capitalists liked the proposal, the startup had solid fundamentals, and they agreed to preliminary terms. Clean, legitimate business that would have made his father proud if Chairman Park cared about legitimacy. But Yi Min couldn't focus properly. Every time Alina passed nearby, every time he caught a glimpse of her, his concentration fractured. Min Jun definitely noticed. His head of security was trained to observe everything, and Yi Min kept glancing at the same server repeatedly. After the meeting concluded and the venture capitalists left, Min Jun approached him quietly. Do you know that woman? Yi Min's blood went cold. Which woman? The black server, you've been watching her all night. Deny have I didn't realize. Min Jun's expression said he didn't believe that for a second. Boss, if there's something I should know about. There isn't, I'm just tired, long day. A flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. But Min Jun was loyal, had been with Yi Min for 7 years and knew when not to push. Understood, should we head out? Give me a minute, I'll meet you at the car. After Min Jun left, Yi Min waited. 5 minutes later, Alina emerged from the back, clearly on a break. He intercepted her near the hallway to the restrooms. This is bad, she whispered immediately. Your security guy noticed. I know, I'm sorry, I didn't know you'd be working here. I picked up a last-minute shift. The agency called this afternoon. She looked genuinely scared. What do we do? Nothing, act like we don't know each other. I'll handle Min-jun. Yi meant. I'll handle it, just be careful. He wanted to touch her, pull her close, promise everything would be fine. Instead, he walked away like she was a stranger he'd stopped to ask for directions. But the damage was done. 3 days later, Chairman Park summoned Yi Min to his private office. Not the corporate headquarters where they conducted legitimate business. The private office in his personal compound, the place where real decisions got made and problems got solved permanently. Yi Min knew immediately this was bad. His father sat behind a massive desk, fingers steepled, expression unreadable. 2 of his personal guards stood nearby, not Yi Min's people, his father's, the kind who'd kill their own mothers if Chairman Park gave the order. Sit, his father said in Korean. Yi Min sat, maintaining neutral body language despite his racing heart. Min-jun tells me you've been distracted lately, Chairman Park continued. Acting strangely, he says you know a woman, a server. So Min-jun had reported after all. Loyalty to the organization always superseded personal loyalty. Yi Min should have expected that. I don't know what you're talking about. His father slid a folder across the desk. Elena Marie Brooks, 26, American, aspiring actress working as an event server. You've been seeing her for 5 months, meeting secretly, hotels in Incheon, her apartment in Hongdae, very careful, very discreet, not careful enough. The folder contained surveillance photos, him and Alina at cafes, walking along the Han River, entering the Incheon hotel, intimate moments that had felt private being analyzed like evidence. Yi Min's hands clenched into fists under the desk. How long have you known? 6 weeks. I wanted to see how far this would go before intervening. 6 weeks. His father had been watching him for 6 weeks, letting him think he was being clever, letting him dig himself deeper. She's irrelevant, Yi Min said, trying to sound dismissive. Just someone I've been spending time with, nothing serious. Don't insult me with lies, Chairman Park's voice went cold. I've watched you your entire life. I know when you care about something, and you care about this woman, which makes her relevant, which makes her dangerous. She doesn't know anything about the business. She knows you, that's enough. His father stood, walked to the window overlooking Seoul. You're my heir, Yi Min, my legacy. Everything I've built will pass to you, but I can't have you weakened by attachments. Can't have you making decisions based on emotion rather than strategy. Yi Min saw where this was going. What do you want me to do? End it immediately, never contact her again, forget she exists. And if I don't? Chairman Park turned, and the look in his eyes was absolutely void of paternal warmth. Then I'll solve the problem permanently. She'll disappear. Tragic accident maybe, wrong place at the wrong time, you'll grieve appropriately and eventually you'll understand I did it for your own good. There it was, the threat delivered without euphemism. End the relationship or Alina dies. You'd murder an innocent woman to prove a point. Yi Min kept his voice level despite the rage building in his chest. I'd eliminate a liability to protect my organization and my heir. She's not innocent, she's a weakness. Weaknesses get exploited. I'm being merciful by giving you the choice to walk away cleanly. Merciful, his father thought terrorizing him into abandoning the person he loved was mercy. I need time. You have 24 hours, end it or I will. The meeting was over, dismissed like a child caught misbehaving. Yi Min left the compound, got into his car and drove aimlessly for an hour before finally going to Alina's apartment. Alina knew something was wrong the moment she opened her door. What happened? Yi Min walked inside, his usual composure completely shattered. My father knows about us everything. Her face went pale. How? He's had us surveilled for weeks, has photos, documentation, all of it. He ran a hand through his hair, packing her small apartment. He's given me an ultimatum, end things with you or he'll kill you. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Because that's what they were. Alina sank onto her couch, processing. When she looked up, tears were streaming down her face, but her voice was steady. Then you have to end it. What? No, I'm not. Yi Min, he'll kill me, you just said that, he'll actually kill me. I won't let him, I'll figure something out, we can run, disappear. Where? Alina's voice rose. Where can we go that your father's organization can't reach? He has connections internationally, you've told me that. There's nowhere we'd be safe. She was right, running was suicide. His father had resources globally, relationships with criminal organizations across Asia, Europe, the Americas. There was literally nowhere they could hide that he wouldn't eventually find them. I can't lose you, Yimin said and heard his voice break. You don't have a choice, this is exactly what I was afraid of, what we both knew was possible. Alina stood, walked to him, put her hands on his chest. Your father is right about one thing, I make you vulnerable, and in your world vulnerability gets people killed. So what, I just walk away, pretend the last 5 months meant nothing. You walk away and keep me alive, then you do what we talked about, transform the organization from inside, become powerful enough that eventually maybe we can try again, but right now I'm a target and the only way to remove that target is to not be important to you anymore. The logic was sound, completely horribly sound. But Yi Min had spent his entire life following logic, doing what was strategic instead of what he wanted. For 5 months, Alina had been the one place where he got to choose feeling over strategy. There has to be another way, he said desperately. If there was, you'd have already thought of it, you're the smartest person I know. Alina's tears were falling freely now. I love you, God, I love you so much, which is exactly why we have to do this, because I can't be the reason you compromise who you're trying to become, can't be the weakness that gets exploited. She was being braver than he was, stronger than he was, making the impossible choice because he couldn't. I don't know how to do this, Yi Min admitted. Neither do I, but we have to anyway. Alina reached up, touched his face. Promise me something, promise you'll keep fighting to change things, don't let this break you back into what your father wants you to be, use the anger, use the pain, use everything you're feeling right now to fuel the transformation we talked about. Alina. Promise me, Yi Min, promise that losing me will mean something, that it'll make you more determined, not less, that you'll build the life we talked about even if I'm not in it. He pulled her close, held her like he could physically prevent her from slipping away. I promise, I swear to you I'll transform everything, dismantle every harmful piece of my father's empire, build something that wouldn't get people like your brother killed, and when I've done that, when it's safe, I'm coming back for you. Okay, she was sobbing against his chest now, okay. They stood there holding each other, both crying, both breaking, both knowing this was the end. Finally, Alina pulled back, wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. You should go now, before I change my mind and do something stupid like ask you to stay. Yi Min wanted to memorize everything about this moment, the way she looked with tears on her cheeks, the way her apartment smelled like vanilla candles she always burned, the way her voice sounded when she said his name. I love you, he said, I will always love you. I know I love you too, now go, please just go. The walk to her door was the longest journey of his life. He turned back once. Alina was standing in the middle of her small apartment, arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller and more fragile than he'd ever seen her. I'll come back, he said. However long it takes, I'll fix everything and I'll come back. She nodded, couldn't seem to speak anymore. Yi Min left, closing the door behind him, walked down the stairs of her building, got into his car, told his driver to take him home. And felt something inside him die. The next 6 months were the hardest of Yi Min's life. He threw himself into work with a single-minded intensity that even his father noticed and approved of. No more distraction, no more weakness, just cold, calculated ambition to transform the organization into something sustainable. Except Chairman Park didn't realize the transformation Yi Min was engineering wasn't toward greater criminal efficiency. It was toward legitimacy. Toward something that wouldn't destroy people like Alina's brother, toward a version of power that didn't require threatening the people he loved. He started systematically dismantling the most violent operations. Protection rackets got reorganized into legitimate security consulting. Loan sharking operations became investment capital with legal interest rates. Drug distribution channels were gradually closed down, resources redirected to real estate and tech investments. Every change was framed as strategic business evolution. His father bought it because the legitimate operations were actually profitable. Revenue increased, political connections strengthened. The Park family became more respectable on the surface while Yi Min eroded the criminal foundation from within. It was dangerous work. Several times, members of the organization questioned the changes. Yi Min had to make examples, not violent ones, just removing people from power, reassigning them, making it clear he was in charge of this transition. His father was getting older, 73 now, still sharp but physically declining, heart problems, doctor's orders to reduce stress. Chairman Park was gradually, reluctantly giving Yi Min more operational control, which meant more power to enact changes, more ability to shift the organization's direction without constant oversight. Yi Min hadn't spoken to Alina since that night in her apartment. He'd kept tabs on her though, couldn't help himself, knew she'd landed a significant role in a web drama, knew she'd moved to a better apartment in Itaewon, knew she was surviving, maybe even thriving without him in her life. That should have made him happy, instead it just hurt. Every day without her felt like drowning in slow motion. He'd wake up reaching for someone who wasn't there. He'd see something funny and instinctively think about telling her. He'd pass cafes where they'd spent hours talking and feel the loss physically, like a wound that wouldn't heal. But he'd made her a promise, transform everything then come back, so that's what he'd do. No matter how long it took, no matter how much it cost him, he'd build the life they'd dreamed about, even if he had to build it alone first. 14 months after losing Alina, Chairman Park had a massive heart attack. Yi Min was in a meeting with city officials when he got the call. Rushed to the hospital to find his father in intensive care, tubes and monitors everywhere, looking suddenly fragile in a way he'd never seemed before. The doctors gave him 6 months at most. The heart damage was too severe. They could manage symptoms, but survival wasn't realistic. Chairman Park took the news stoically. "Then we accelerate succession," he told Yi Min from his hospital bed. "I want everything transferred formally before I die, no power vacuum, no uncertainty." Over the next 3 months, Yi Min took complete operational control. His father was still technically in charge but increasingly confined to bed, unable to actively manage anything, which gave Yi Min the freedom he'd been waiting for. He accelerated the transformation exponentially. Shut down the remaining drug operations entirely, ended weapon trafficking, converted gambling dens to legitimate entertainment venues, paid off every corrupt police officer and politician with severance packages that included evidence destruction, ensuring they had no incentive to retaliate. The organization was becoming something his father would barely recognize. One night shortly before Chairman Park died, he called Yi Min to his bedside. "You're changing everything," his father said, his voice weak but still sharp, "dismantling what I built." Yi Min didn't deny it. "Yes." "Why?" "Because it was built on suffering, and I don't want that as my legacy." Chairman Park was quiet for a long moment, then, surprisingly, he smiled. "That woman, the server, this is about her, isn't it?" Yi Min's jaw tightened, partially. "I should have killed her when I had the chance, would have saved you this idealism." But there was no heat in his father's words, just tired recognition. "You were always too soft, your mother's influence. I tried to beat it out of you, but it survived anyway." "I'm not soft, I'm strategic. The organization is more profitable and sustainable now than it's ever been. You built an empire on fear, I'm building one on actual value." "Pretty words, we'll see if they last." His father's eyes closed. "But you're my son, my heir, whatever you build it's yours now, just don't let them forget the Park name meant power, even if you change how that power operates." "I won't forget." Chairman Park died 3 days later. The funeral was massive. Politicians, business leaders, criminal associates from across Asia. Everyone pretending to mourn a man most of them had feared. Yi Min played the grieving son convincingly, said all the right things, accepted condolences gracefully. But mostly he felt relief. His father was gone. The last obstacle to complete transformation was removed. Now he could finish what he'd started without resistance from the one person who could have stopped him. Now he could build the life Alina had believed was possible. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of systematic change. Yi Min liquidated every remaining illegal asset, redirected all resources toward legitimate enterprises, Tech startups, real estate development, clean energy investments. The Park family fortune wasn't just being laundered, it was being transformed into something that actually contributed value to society. He established community programs in the neighborhoods the organization had once exploited. Youth centers, job training initiatives, scholarships for kids from disadvantaged backgrounds, places where someone like Alina's brother might have had alternatives to gang involvement. His organization's former enforcers retrained as legitimate security consultants. His former accountants who'd handled illegal finances, now running venture capital analysis and portfolio management. People who'd known only criminal operations were being given second chances at legitimate careers. Not everyone accepted the transformation. Some of the old guard resisted, wanted to return to profitable illegal operations. Yi Min was ruthless with those individuals, not violently but definitively. They were removed from the organization entirely, their connections severed, their influence eliminated. The Park empire was rebuilt from the ground up. It took 18 months total, counting the work he'd started before his father died. 18 months of exhausting, dangerous, often frustrating work. But at the end, Yi Min stood at the head of an organization that was completely legitimate. Profitable, powerful, influential, but clean. No more blood money, no more destroyed lives, no more being complicit in the systems that created tragedies like Marcus Brooks' death. He'd kept his promise to Alina, transformed everything, built the life they'd talked about that night in her apartment. Now came the hard part, going back for her like he'd sworn he would. Hopping she'd kept space in her life for him. Hopping 18 months hadn't been too long, hopping she'd believe him when he told her everything had changed. Yi Min found Alina at a community theater in Hongdae. She was rehearsing for a production, something independent, small-scale but clearly meaningful to her. He watched from the back of the theater for 10 minutes before she noticed him, just taking in the sight of her moving across the stage. She'd changed, seemed more confident, more grounded. Her acting was genuinely good, he wasn't an expert, but even he could tell she'd grown significantly. When the director called for a break, Alina walked off stage and froze when she saw him standing in the aisle. "Hi," Yi Min said, his voice rough with nerves. "Hi." Alina didn't move closer. "What are you doing here?" "I kept my promise, I transformed everything. The organization is completely legitimate now, no more criminal operations, no more violence. It took 18 months, but I did it." She stared at him like she couldn't quite believe he was real. "Your father died 16 months ago, heart attack. After that I accelerated the changes. It's done, Alina, everything we talked about, I built it." Tears were forming in her eyes. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I also promised I'd come back for you once it was safe, once I'd fixed everything." He took a step closer. "I love you, never stopped loving you, and I'm hoping maybe you'll give me another chance, give us another chance." Alina was crying now, not bothering to hide it. "You actually did it, you actually transformed a criminal empire. With you as my reason why, every hard decision, every risk, every moment I wanted to quit, I thought about you. About the life we could have if I just kept going." She closed the distance between them and suddenly they were holding each other like the 18 months hadn't happened, like no time had passed at all. "I missed you so much," Alina whispered against his chest, "every single day. I missed you too, more than I thought it was possible to miss another person." They stood there in the empty theater, holding each other, both crying, both laughing, both overwhelmed by the impossible fact that they'd actually survived being apart. "So what happens now?" Alina asked, pulling back to look at him. "Now we get the life we should have had from the beginning, no secrets, no danger, just us, if you'll have me." Her smile was the same one that had stopped him at that gala 2 years ago. Genuine, warm, real. "Yeah," she said, "yeah, I'll have you." Yi Min kissed her and it felt like coming home. Like every terrible thing he'd endured in the last 18 months had been worth it for this exact moment. They'd been torn apart by violence and fear and impossible circumstances, but they'd fought their way back to each other, transformed themselves and the world around them in the process. Some love stories end in tragedy, this one refused to. Drop a comment telling me what you think about second chances and redemption. because what happens next will prove love can literally change everything. The community center in Gambuk wasn't fancy. No crystal chandeliers, no marble floors, no supermodels positioned like decorations. Just a renovated building that had once been a warehouse, now serving as a safe space for at-risk youth. Kids from broken homes, kids involved with gangs, kids who needed someone to believe they could be more than their circumstances. Yimin volunteered there 3 times a week, teaching business skills, mentoring teenagers who reminded him uncomfortably of his younger self, trying to give them the alternatives he'd never had. Today, though, the center had been transformed for a wedding. His wedding. Simple decorations, string lights Alina had insisted on, flowers from a local shop, chairs borrowed from the neighborhood church, maybe 50 people total. Alina's family flew in from Atlanta. A few of Yimin's former associates who'd successfully transitioned to legitimate work, staff from the community center, friends Alina had made in Seoul's theater community. No politicians, no business moguls, no one there to network or make connections, just people who actually cared about them. Alina walked down the makeshift aisle wearing a simple white dress, no train, no veil. Her mother cried. Yimin might have cried too, but he was too busy trying to breathe through the overwhelming reality that this was actually happening. That after everything, the violence, the separation, the transformation, the fear, they'd made it here. The ceremony was short, they'd written their own vows. Alina went first, her voice steady despite tears streaming down her face. You walked past 50 models and saw me, but more importantly you saw who you could become. You chose growth over comfort, change over tradition, love over fear. You rebuilt an empire into something that saves lives instead of destroying them. I'm not just marrying the man you are, I'm marrying the courage it took to become him. Yimin had written his vows on paper because he knew he'd forget them otherwise. His hands shook slightly as he read. You smiled at a charity gala and broke something open in me I didn't know was closed. You saw darkness in my life and didn't run, you helped me find light instead. You sacrificed our relationship to keep us both safe, then waited while I fought my way back to you. You made me believe transformation was possible. This community center, these programs, every life we help here, that's all because you taught me people can choose to be better. I love you. I will spend the rest of my life proving you were right to believe in me. They kissed, everyone cheered. And just like that, Yimin Park, former criminal heir, reluctant mob boss, now legitimate businessman and community activist, married the waitress whose smile had changed his entire world. The reception was exactly what Alina wanted. No formal dining, just food trucks parked outside. Korean barbecue, tacos, soul food. Music was a playlist she'd curated herself. Everything from K-pop to American R&B. People danced, laughed, ate with their hands. Yimin's former head of security, Min Jun, now running a legitimate security consulting firm, approached him near the food trucks. Never thought I'd see you at a wedding in a community center, boss. Not boss anymore, just Yimin. He meant it. The hierarchy, the fear, the performance, all of it was gone. And yeah, me neither, life's strange. Strange good though? Min Jun glanced at Elena, who was dancing with her mother. She saved you, didn't she, from becoming your father? We saved each other, I think. Later that night, after most guests had left and they were helping clean up, Alina found Yimin standing outside the community center. Looking at the Seoul skyline. Thinking about something, she asked, slipping her hand into his. Thinking about that gala 2 years ago, how I walked past all those beautiful people feeling nothing, then you smiled and everything shifted. He turned to face her. I was so numb back then, dead inside without realizing it. You made me feel human again. You were always human, just trapped in a cage someone else built. Alina leaned against him. But you broke out, that's the important part. You chose differently. Because of you. Because of you too, I just reminded you the choice existed. Yimin pulled her closer, breathed in the scent of her hair, felt the solid reality of her against him. I'm terrified I'll wake up and this will all be a dream, that I'm still trapped in that life, still numb, still alone. You're not, this is real. She looked up at him, those same warm, intelligent eyes that had stopped him in his tracks 2 years ago. We're real, the center is real, the lives we're changing are real. You did the impossible, Yimin. You transformed not just an organization but yourself. That's not a dream, that's a miracle. Maybe it was. Yimin didn't believe in miracles typically. Believed in strategy, calculated risk, careful planning. But standing there with Alina on their wedding night outside a community center built from the ashes of his father's empire, helping kids who'd once been him, that felt miraculous. "I love you," he said for the thousandth time, for the millionth time, forever insufficient words for what he actually felt. "I love you too, now come on, we have a honeymoon to start. And by honeymoon, I mean that tiny Airbnb in Jeju because we spent our budget on the community programs. Best honeymoon ever." She laughed, pulled him back inside where a few remaining friends were still celebrating. The center's director, a woman who'd grown up in these same streets, raised a glass. "To Yi Min and Alina, for proving people can change, for building something beautiful from something broken, for showing all of us what's possible when you choose love over fear." They raised their glasses. Yi Min looked around at these people, genuine, real, present, and felt something he'd never experienced at his father's galas surrounded by wealth and power. He felt home. Some stories start with a smile. This one did too. But it ended with transformation, redemption, and the radical belief that no one is beyond saving if they're willing to do the work. Yi Min Park walked past 50 models until a waitress's smile stunned him, but Alina Brooks did more than stun him. She saved him, and in saving him gave him the tools to save himself. That's what real love does. It doesn't fix you. It shows you that you're worth fixing. Then it stands beside you while you do the hard, painful work of becoming who you were always meant to be. So if this story moved you, if you believe in second chances, in transformation, in the idea that people can choose to be better, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And drop a comment telling me about a time when someone believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. Because those are the moments that change everything. Stories like Yi Min and Alina's remind us that our past doesn't dictate our future. That love can be a catalyst for profound change. That even empires built on darkness can be transformed into light if someone has the courage to try. Thank you for watching. Thank you for believing in redemption. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing in the world isn't wealth or influence or power. Sometimes it's just a smile. A genuine, authentic, real smile that sees past the armor and recognizes the human underneath. That's where transformation begins.